Greetings everyone, my name is Dominic and today you're tuning in to the Comic Book Report, where we review comic books and graphic novels so you can get an idea of what to read. And today I've got another list video for you all. As we're about to go into a new year, I'm looking back and I've picked out my top 10 comic book paperback editions for 2023. I feel like so many comic review channels focus on hardcovers and omnibuses, myself included, and every so often I like to shout out the paperback editions. I know there's fans out there, so I hope you all enjoy the video. Before we jump in though, I just want to shout out our channel sponsor, OrganicPriceBooks.com. If you're looking to pick up your own comic book collected editions, I highly encourage you to check out their website. You can find a link for it in the description for this video, and if you find something you like, you can even use my discount code at checkout, TheComicBookReport, to receive $2 off of your order. Please note if you use my affiliate link or code to make a purchase, I will earn a small commission, but it's a fantastic way to support this channel. Thank you so much for considering. Now let's get started with today's top 10. First on the list, in no particular order, I'm going to be talking about Batman Joker's Asylum. This trade paperback collection came out from DC Comics this year and collects both Joker's Asylum miniseries. This was a really fun one that I don't know if I rated all that high back when I reviewed it on the channel, but it's really stuck with me over time. Basically, we have the Joker serving as the kind of crypt keeper, frame narrative character who's basically going into the lives of the different Gotham villains, and each issue is kind of this one shot that shows kind of more about their character. It really highlights again one of Gotham's villains. That's the first miniseries. The second miniseries is almost identical but with a new batch of villains. We go through some really good ones here. We of course have the Joker present throughout most of this, but we have Two-Face and Killer Croc and Mad Hatter and Scarecrow and Poison Ivy and so many more. This paperback really does pack a punch, and I think if you're a fan of Batman like me, you maybe not only enjoy Batman and the Bat family, but also his big selection of villains. I think the villains of Batman are almost as iconic as the Dark Knight himself, and a collection like this is certainly something interesting on my library. It definitely varies just what I have in my collection. I will say that after you read a couple things narrated or kind of curated by the Joker, you really do see that this is a darker kind of storytelling for this book, but again, it adds a different layer to my Batman collection, and overall I really enjoyed making my way through it. It again is not like a lot of other books I've read, and I think that there is a bit of a mixed bag of quality from story to story. It feels very much like an anthology that all has kind of a similar theme or idea. In many ways it almost reminds me of the Batman One Bad Day kind of situation they did recently. So if you're a fan of Batman One Bad Day, this is another title for you to pick up. It's definitely enjoyable. I had fun making my way through it. Like I said, I did review it on the channel if you want more details, but that is Batman Joker's Asylum. Next on my trade paperback list today, we have Radiant Black Volume 2 Team Up. I did read the first volume of Radiant Black last year, and I enjoyed it immensely. There was a lot of great twists and turns, and I was absolutely hooked. I, like many people, thought Kyle Higgins had discovered kind of the next generation's version of Invincible, where we have this indie superhero comic that's just sweeping so many comic fans off their feet. And I do think that it's a really impressive series. It's still ongoing. It's part of a bigger universe. I know Kyle Higgins has written a lot of books, superhero narratives, and even Power Rangers, and this really feels like the cross-section between a classic superhero narrative and something like the Power Rangers. So he's the perfect man for the job, and this is a really fun title. I will say I'm surprised it took so long to get to Volume 2 after immensely enjoying Volume 1. But I did kind of meander making my way to this volume, but I picked it up this year, read it, and really enjoyed it, and here I am. I still haven't picked up Volume 3. I don't know what I'm doing, but honestly, I'll get to it when I can. I do like this series, and this definitely kind of continued the narrative in ways that I felt were very important. We got to go deeper into some of the characters and get to know kind of the broader supporting cast within this volume. I don't think it packed as much of a punch as the Volume 1 initially, but it's still visually gorgeous. There's even an issue or two that are heavily stylized. I won't spoil too much here, but it's a very, very good volume. We get to know the other kind of Radiant characters a bit more in this volume. So if you're interested in this world, maybe you picked up volume 1 like myself and you want to see if it's worth continuing, I will say after volume 2, I'm definitely interested in keeping this series going as far as my readership. Which actually brings me to this point. If you're still reading Radiant Black as it's ongoing, let me know what you think. Is it still good? Is it worth reading? Is it still worth kind of following up with? I'd love to get that feedback in the comments. And hey, if you're watching this video and you're enjoying it and you have yet to subscribe to the channel, I just want to invite you to do so. I'm always making list videos, comic book reviews, unboxing, shorts, community posts. Anyway, thanks for considering. Now let's keep it going. Next up, we have Junkyard Joe by Geoff Johns and Gary Frank over at Image Comics. This is the next series in his unnamed universe over at Image. Geoff Johns also wrote Geiger, which was also illustrated by Gary Frank. If you're unfamiliar with this unnamed universe that Geoff Johns is starting over at Image, essentially it's kind of a take on modern American tall tales, alternative history, and we basically have this assemblage of different kind of heroic individuals throughout times that maybe present themselves during war times in America. Anyway, it's a really fascinating series of books so far. Geiger's set in the future with kind of a dystopian wasteland future with a radioactive superhero. And next up we have Junkyard Joe, which came right out of Vietnam era. We do have kind of a modern day story here though. We have a flash forward after the Vietnam War, but it basically follows this robot who is sort of a soldier, and this is really, really moving. I think if you know any veterans or perhaps you're a serviceman or woman yourself, this can be a pretty hard-hitting story. I think that they were really faithful to a lot of the servicemen in our country, servicewomen as well, and I think that it really hits home. I know that some of the proceeds of some of these issues have gone to veterans organizations. There's certainly a lot of extras at the back of this book that kind of go into how all these creators are tied to veterans of the American military. Anyway, it's all really good there, but the storytelling itself is really grounded and interesting. It's definitely very character driven, and with the central character being a robot, you might think, how emotional can this really be? But let me tell you something, it's quite gripping. I don't know if I liked it quite as much as Geiger, but at the same time, it was still very, very close. It's a beautifully made trade paperback collection. Like the rest of these paperbacks, it's all standard size, but it's really well put together. I think Image makes a really good paperback, and this is definitely amongst my favorites. I did do a first look at the first couple issues of this prior to its release, and then I did review the trade paperback when I received it and read it some months ago. Anyway, this is definitely a standout for 2023 for me when I think about my paperback collection. Next up, we have Avengers Disassembled by Brian Michael Bendis, and this brings me to a good point in this list, which is that these are not all books that came out in 2023. To make the list, I just had to have read it in 2023, and this is something I finally got to read this year, and I'm so happy I did. After reading and absolutely loving the House of M omnibus, I had heard from so many that it directly follows the events of Avengers Disassembled, and so many people felt like this should have been included in that omnibus, and now that I have read it, I have to agree with that. This should have been the prelude to House of M that everyone should have read before reading that event, and certainly that omnibus. This kind of tells the tale of how the Avengers basically, yes, disassemble, but it's really gripping, and the whole thing is only a couple issues long, so we're treated to a nice tight narrative. We have some beautiful artwork by, I believe, David Finch, and while it's a great standalone story itself, especially if you're a fan of the Marvel Universe or the Avengers characters in particular, but again, it's such a great tee-off for everything that happens with House of M, especially in regards to characters like the Scarlet Witch. Reading this, I just can't wait to hopefully one day read all of Brian Michael Bendis' run on Avengers. I've loved what I've read so far, and this chapter is definitely a pivotal one that I absolutely can't wait to read in continuity with all the issues that came before. But after reading House of M, I absolutely was floored by how good this was. It's a super standout in my collection. I know that this is something you can find in secondary markets. I don't think it's still in print in this format, but I was so happy to get a copy from my local comic shop this year, and I just had to include it on this list. It's such a fun paperback. For a couple of issues, it's so just narratively dense. The art, again, from David Finch is just absolutely jaw-dropping. We get to see so much of the Marvel Universe as far as the main cast of heroes across these few issues that it's really great. It's wonderful to see the artwork for all of these awesome heroes and the battle sequences, and just the drama is so heavy and intense, and knowing this spills out directly into House of M, it just makes this whole story so much more full and rewarding. Next on my list, I have to talk about Moon Knight, the complete collection by Lemire and Smallwood. This is a book I actually read really recently. I reviewed it on the channel not too long ago, but it definitely makes my list for one of my favorites of 2023. Admittedly, I am newer to the character of Moon Knight, but I am enjoying what I've read thus far. A really complicated central character, but in the hands of someone like Geoff Lemire, we get a really nuanced but easily accessible overall storytelling mechanic here in this run. It's really a psychological thriller, kind of mind-bending. You're not really sure what to believe, but I am absolutely here for the ride. And with the art from Smallwood and a cast of others, it's just an incredible visual storytelling treat as well. I think this art is so stylized, all the different artists that showcase their talent in this book. It's just really something to behold, as you can see as I'm flipping through. For those that don't know, Moon Knight, or Mark Spector, has dissociative identity disorder, multiple personality disorder, and how this art and this run kind of depicts that is that every time we click into another personality, there is a different artist on the book. I love that so much. It's so easy to tell who's kind of in the driver's seat, and it's a wonderful way to, again, see this vast array of just industry professionals in such a fantastic run. It's only 14 issues long, but you get the entire run here, and I just think it's a fantastic collection. I would love this in kind of a small omnibus, or maybe combined with a couple other modern runs, but in this trade paperback collection, I'm still certainly happy to have these issues. It was a blast to read, beyond a page turner. It was just so hard to put down. A lot of the book was set in kind of a mental asylum or institution, which I thought was fascinating. Some we have kind of depictions of sort of ancient Egypt. Really, really a fun book. I will say it's pretty accessible for new readers like myself. It helped to have seen the Disney Plus series and know a bit about Moon Knight in general. But overall, again, pretty accessible. And for fans of Geoff Lemire, this is really one of my favorite he's done for the big two that I've had the opportunity to read over here at Marvel Comics. Really a fun book. Next on my list for top 10 paperbacks of 2023, I'm going to go back to DC here with Flashpoint Beyond by Geoff Johns. Yes, this is the sequel to Flashpoint, that incredible event that DC did maybe over 10 years ago now, 10, 15 years, crazy. But this is a really fun book. I do think I, again, graded it not super highly, but in the months since I've read and reviewed it, I have been thinking about it. It's something that's on my mind every so often. I do love the Thomas Wayne Flashpoint Batman, and I just overall loved this world. And what I was looking for in the sequel more than anything was just to really play in this sandbox one more time, especially with the character of Thomas Wayne. And that is what I got here. I will say it took a lot of different turns than I expected. In some ways, the scope of it feels smaller. It feels like a more intimate story as we really follow Thomas Wayne's Batman on kind of a mystery trail the entire time. And we do have kind of the Flashpoint universe folding into itself, or kind of at the risk of cracking again, but it's almost not secondary, but we're so focused on the narrative of Thomas Wayne that it's almost like you lose sight of the broadness of this world. And I think to have a more intimate kind of detective story was something I was very surprised to see in an event sequel of this kind. I do think overall the artwork is absolutely phenomenal. I think if you enjoyed the first Flashpoint, you have a solid chance of enjoying this sequel. I do think that it does require a bit of background reading. I think minimally the first Flashpoint. I think if you've read that and nothing else, you'll at least have some kind of foundation to still enjoy this book. But certainly if you've read kind of the expanded Flashpoint material with all the tie-ins from all the different titles, if you know something about Thomas Wayne's Batman, maybe you've read some of the Tom King run, for example, I think all of these things can kind of help fill out this world and this event and what happens here a bit more for you. But certainly this was a standout for me for 2023. It was one of the trade paperback comic events I picked up this year, and it's definitely something I think about. Next up, and this is a fun one, Batman Beyond Neo Year. This was a great trade paperback collection that includes this first mini-series here from Colin Kelly and Jackson Lanzing. Yes, I got this edition signed. If you haven't seen the video, these co-creators, these co-writers were at my local comic shop not too long ago. I had just finished reading this and I brought it in for them to sign. They were both really generous of their time. They talked to me not only about this book, but what they plan for the sequel following up to Neo Year. Again, just really really, really great guys, and it says something that by itself, this work was already something I thoroughly enjoyed, but after meeting the creators, I just enjoy it all that much more. This is set in the future kind of neo-Gotham era. We follow Terry McGinnis, Batman Beyond. After something happens to Bruce Wayne, Terry McGinnis is kind of off on his own, and he's trying to save neo-Gotham from basically an evil AI, but it's a really great miniseries. It's pretty fast-paced. I will say for fans of the animated series, it feels very loyal, both visually, tonally. The character feels like a slightly older version of Terry, and it just works for me. It feels like an extension of that world, which is what I was hoping for with this trade paperback. Admittedly, I haven't read any other Batman Beyond comic books, so I can't really compare it for you there if you're a fan of a lot of other Batman Beyond comic books. I, again, in the comments below, would love recommendations for other maybe runs of Batman Beyond. I've heard mixed quality, but this was really fun, and like I said, I think if you enjoyed the animated series, you will enjoy this. I will say I was able to read this as a new Batman Beyond reader and not miss a step. I will say it's probably because I'm familiar with the animated series, but I think just about anyone can pick this up and enjoy it, knowing that this is a future Gotham City with a whole new Batman. The art is really lush and beautiful. Like I said, it feels faithful to the animated series, but it kind of I think even just elevates it even more beyond what we saw in the animation, and I love it for that. I think that Neo Gotham looks absolutely true to form, and this was just a blast to read. I cannot wait to read the follow-up, and just generally had to include it on the list. Okay, next is arguably my favorite comic of the year, Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow by Tom King and Bilquis Evely. This is a universe-spanning kind of science fiction, coming-of-age epic, and I couldn't have loved this book more. I know it's gotten a lot of hype, but in my mind, it absolutely deserves it. Admittedly, I am a fan of Tom King, but I knew almost nothing about Supergirl. I've seen her in big crisis events, I've read books that she's in, I'm kind of culturally aware of her, but I had never read a standalone Supergirl comic in my life, to my knowledge, and this, wow, it just has me really loving not only this character, but this whole world that King and Evely were able to create. Bilquis Evely is someone I've never seen her art before, but man, I'm an immediate fan for life after seeing everything she did with Supergirl. The worlds we see depicted, space travel, the character models, everything is just so lovely. There's this kind of like dreamy, surreal, wispy quality to all the artwork that I absolutely adore. Yes, this is a trade paperback for now, but I do think a hardcover edition is coming, and I might just get the upgrade because the art is that beautiful. The narration from the central character, who is a young, kind of coming-of-age adolescent young woman, she is very precocious, but it absolutely feels true to form for Tom King's more lyrical, kind of poetic prose. I love the narration in this book. Like I said, it adds to that dreamy quality. There is kind of a poetry to the language here in this book, and I could not have loved it more. Supergirl is such a noble character, even at this crossroads in her life where she feels like kind of a lost girl in many ways. She's still such a beacon of hope and truth and goodness, and this was just something else. I did review it on the channel not too long ago, but as time goes by, I'm really just settling into the fact that this was probably my favorite book I read this last year. And yes, it was a paperback. So all of you that only collect hardcover editions, definitely think about branching out maybe a little bit. I know for me, I love collecting different formats because there's something unique and great about all of them. Anyway, if you haven't read Supergirl, definitely check it out. Next up, I couldn't do a best paperback video without talking about the Marvel Epic Collection line, and in this case, we're looking at the Punisher Circle of Blood. A quick note if you don't know about Marvel Epic Collections, essentially they're like 20-something issue books that are done sequentially. They are released out of order though, but presumably if you are around long enough to get all of a title's Epic Collections, you could have a chronological reading order for the character in their main series. It's a really fantastic line, you get full color reprints, it's standard size, really love this line. Anyway, this was my first Punisher Epic Collection, and actually my first solo-titled Punisher book outside of the original Marvel Essential kind of reprint black and white books. Anyway, I had never read any of these issues, any of the miniseries, and this was such a fun read. I love the artwork of the time here. It's some of Punisher's earliest solo self-titled works, and it's a really fun look at Frank Castle and this kind of grittier world of the Punisher. I also enjoyed it because it's not when we get to Punisher Max where it's a lot more violent, grotesque, super kind of gut-churningly violent, and it's just sort of more tame, Marvel, just general friendly Punisher. I mean, he's not friendly, but compared to like the Punisher Max kind of storyline, it's definitely a bit more tame. So if you've ever wanted to read the Punisher, but maybe you're not into as much graphic violence or intensity, some of these old Punisher books are maybe just the way to go. Again, I love this era of comics, and this epic collection was just really well made. It was maybe 400 to 500 pages, so it's a really solid paperback collection, and it was one of my favorites all year long. Like with any larger book that has more of a run, there were some uneven issues, some were better than others, but overall, just a fantastic reading experience. I look forward to hopefully one day getting more Punisher epic collections like this. If you have recommendations for that, again, I'd like to hear from you in the comments. Always eager to read more good Punisher. And last but certainly not least, we have Undiscovered Country Volume 2 Unity from Scott Snyder and Charles Soule. These co-writers really deliver this fantastic sort of dystopian future science fiction series. It takes place in a world where America has been shut off, walled out to the rest of the world, complete communication blackout for decades now. The rest of the world has kind of joined one of two factions, but everyone's kind of getting wiped out by this global plague. And out of nowhere, they get a message from America inviting a small group of people to come inside its walls. They claim they have a cure for this virus that's ravaging the world. But once inside, we have just this really, really intense kind of science fiction wasteland sort of nightmarescape. And this group of characters has to survive, figure out what's happening, and make their way through America to the center of it all to hopefully find the answers they seek and maybe a worldwide cure. This is the Volume 2. I did read Volume 1 in, I believe, 2022, but this has actually so far been my highlight collection of the series so far. At the time of this recording, there are 4 volumes in this paperback format released for this series, no hardcovers yet. I've reviewed the first 3 on the channel, and I actually just finished Volume 4, so hopefully I'll have that review out soon as well. If you're interested in that, definitely stay tuned to the channel. But this volume itself was a particular standout for me because this explored a facet of this futuristic country that was all high technology based, and there was almost kind of horror elements to it, kind of some body horror mechanics to it, and I just thought this whole world building was fascinating. The series artists are always incredible, but to see them do this kind of high-tech future setting was just one of my favorites. I've now passed this point in the series by almost double, and yet I still come back to this era often and just think fondly how much I enjoyed this collection. If you've enjoyed Undiscovered Country Volume 1, definitely pick this up. It's a no-brainer. If this looks fascinating to you at all, I highly encourage this series from Image Comics. I've had a blast going through it. It's still currently ongoing, but so far I can just say it's worth the ride. And with that, can you believe it? That's already rounded out my top 10 favorite trade paperback collections this year, 2023. Paperback is such a fun format. It's so easy to read. Usually these collections are lighter weight. And frankly, I always enjoy doing paperback lists or reviewing paperbacks. I am a fan of those kind of hardcover, prestige formats like omnibus or deluxe editions. But every so often, I like getting just paperback books. There's something to the simplicity of it. I started collecting comics and trade paperbacks, so I always have a heart for them. Anyway, I'd love the comment section. What are some of your favorite paperback comics you've had the chance to read this year? Maybe what are a couple that are on the horizon that you're hoping to pick up in the near future? Love great recommendations in the comments. If you enjoyed any of the books I've read this year here on this video, let me know in the comments. Maybe you didn't, let me know that too. Thank you so much for watching. These lists are a blast. If I have time, I'm hoping to do a couple other best of 2023 videos before year end. So stick around if you're interested, but otherwise, thank you so much for watching. This has been the Comic Book Report. Please don't forget to leave your like, comment, and maybe share this video with a friend. Thank you so much again, and have a good one.